kind of funny. They're like, oh, Frank Grillo is an awesome fighter. Let's make him a coach. Welcome
to Recotopia, a happy home for recommended movies, TV shows, music, video games, foodstuffs, and more from three people you can definitely trust. Trustability varies by region, no guarantees implied. And now, here are your hosts, Chris Atkinson, Jeremy Scott, and Aaron Dicer.
So you won't forgive me, but you forgave Pop.
No, he's just some old vet that I train with. You know, he means nothing to me. And what I hear, he means nothing to you either. You got balls talking about forgiveness.
Hello, everybody. It is episode 108 of Recotopia. Today's big recommend is Warrior. I'm joined by Aaron Dicer.
Shooting down the walls of heartache, a bang,
wow.
bang.
I was singing this song quite a bit every time I thought about this movie. Yes, I did. And I'm also joined by Jeremy Scott.
I don't have any song prepared, dang it.
That's too bad. That's too bad. My name is Chris Atkinson. If you didn't know, I'm very important. I needed to introduce myself. Also, over on to the chat, welcome again to all of you who are coming out to watch us on a Tuesday, talk about movies and things. And speaking of which, does anybody have any small recommends?
It's no big deal.
Itty bitty living space.
It's so small and light.
It's small, it's tiny, it's petite, it's wee.
I do, and it's not a movie.
Oh, no, shocker.
It's a television show. It's not a Mountain Dew flavor, although I will say future Mountain Dew flavors will be coming as a recommend because I've got two in my fridge I haven't tried yet, and I'm sure I'm going to like at least one of them. The new season of Top Chef is here, and I have talked to Top Chef before, but this is different for a number of reasons. Longtime host Padma Lakshmi is gone. She left on good terms, but she was tired of stuffing her face every year for 3 months at a time and having to work really hard to lose that weight. I'm sure that's not all of it. She wanted to try some new things, but we have a new host, and that's Kristen Kish. If you are a Top Chef fan, you know Kristen Kish. She won season 10. If you are a food show fan, you probably know her. She's hosted Fast Foodies. She was on Iron Chef. She had a National Geographic show, Restaurants at the End of the World. She is an incredible host. She's really knowledgeable about food. She's a really pleasant personality, but she, like Padma, has just enough edge when it's right. When they announced that she was going to be the new host, I think I tweeted, "This is perfect," and it is. They've had one episode. It airs on Wednesday nights on Bravo, but they're also changing up some of the rules of Top Chef. So traditionally, they have two challenges: a quick fire, which is a shorter challenge, and then an elimination challenge. And if you win the quick fire, you have immunity. You can't be eliminated. So they're changing that up. Now the quick fire will just win you $10,000 cash, which is nice, but you won't win an immunity from that. You can only win immunity by winning the elimination challenge, and then you're immune for the next elimination challenge. So it changes things up a little bit in terms of how things will be presented, what their motivations are in particular challenges. Now they have cash to shoot for. Is that more motivating than being immune, what have you? And episodes are going to be, most of them, 75 minutes this year instead of 60 minutes. So lots of interesting small little changes in what I think is one of the best reality shows we've ever had. And I'm very, very excited about where this season is going. And if you have never watched it, this is a really great season to jump in. I loved this first episode because she had all the James Beard nominees and Michelin star cooks raise their hands, and it's more than half the group. And then she said, "Listen, when I won this show, I had 2 cooking jobs as a sous chef on my resume. So all that stuff doesn't mean shit, basically." Awesome. Anyway, there you go. I'm done. Let's let Dicer recommend a movie now.
All right. I guess I will. This was a movie from last year called The Promised Land. This stars Mads Mikkelsen. This is a Western, but it is a Western set in a different country. And I believe this is Denmark, it's one of those Scandinavian countries. And there is a section of the country that is, or was thought to be impossible to cultivate any kind of living, like any kind of crops or anything like that. And the Mads Mikkelsen character gets permission from the king to go give it a shot. Well, he doesn't realize he's interfering on another high society person's plans to eventually overtake that land. And so there is this, rivalry that builds between them. This is a phenomenal movie. This is really, really interesting. Amanda Collin stars in it as well. She was, I'm trying to remember the name of the, what was that really weird space show she was in that nobody watched or liked? Raised by Wolves. Do you guys remember Raised by Wolves when that came out? She was Mother on Raised by Wolves. But yeah, the cast is great. The acting's great. The moments are intense. The perseverance is really interesting, and the fact that it's based on a real historical figure is really interesting as well. So I would give it a shot. I think you can rent it on VOD or buy it or whatever from all the normal places. But it is called The Promised Land, and it's one that fell through the cracks for me last year, and I'm glad I finally got around to it.
He started out by saying he gets permission from the king to go give it a shot to try and grow some crops, and I immediately thought of Idiocracy.
Yes.
Which is unfair to your recommend, because that's nothing like this movie. This sounds interesting, and I feel like Mads Mikkelsen has a really unique career. He continues to choose projects that, to me, mostly fly under the radar, and then when I hear about them, they're great. This is like the 4th or 5th movie he's been in like that. So
yeah, Another Round was like that too.
This movie is from Denmark, by the way, and I think it was their submission for Best International Feature as well.
Yep.
I watched a couple of movies over the weekend in theaters. One of them I can heartily recommend is heartily recommend, not hardly.
I thought for a second you were going to trash the movie.
No. I could tell how that sounded coming out of my mouth. I can heartily recommend is Late Night with the Devil, and starring David Dastmalchian as the lead character here. And I don't know if you guys are fascinated with stuff like this like I am, but when there's something bad is going to happen, whether it be sports or like in the real world or whatever, and there's like actual video of it. Watching all the stuff before it happens is just as fascinating as what happens later on. And that's how this movie kind of builds, although it does give you a little bit of something before it gets into its craziness and everything. But this is a guy who starts off as a late night talk show host in, I can't remember which state it is. He's a local guy at first. And then he does well enough that he gets a national show. And then he is competing with Johnny Carson for this is back in the 1970s and everything. And he's competing with Johnny Carson for ratings. And he does well for a bit. And then ratings start to fall off a little bit. And his wife is dying of cancer. And all sorts of things bad are happening to him. And in one of his episodes before he takes a hiatus where his wife dies, it's pretty clear, I guess, that he's using her as a ratings gambit early on. He puts her on the show. It's very emotional, and everybody's like, that was a great show, whatever. But then he takes a month-long hiatus, and then he comes back on a Halloween night in 1977, and he invites all these guests who are like mentalists and people who like debunk mentalists. And he's even got someone who's a parapsychologist who's been taking care of this little girl who they claim is possessed by a demon. So you watch this TV show unfold, and there are a lot of things that happen where you're like, okay, a lot of this could just be the TV show. They wanted the craziest things possible and everything. But once it gets to this part, when the little girl is possessed and like stuff that happens right in front of our eyes shouldn't be happening, this movie gets really wild and really crazy. The movie's great throughout, by the way, even though it takes a slow build to get to it. It's very quick, an hour and a half. Highly recommend this movie. I think it opened limited over this past weekend. Although if you want to call 1,000 theaters limited, but it's definitely less than like Frozen Empire or something like that. You know, it's you can't find it everywhere, but if you can find a theater to watch this, very brisk, very good, highly recommend.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, now that that's been said, and it has engaged us in such titillating conversation.
I just haven't seen it. I know nothing. And so when a movie's just
you,
out,
Aaron, you see everything.
I know.
Go to hell. Go to hell.
I just I haven't even seen Ghostbusters yet, man. I don't even know what's going on.
Well, I can do a quick dis recommend.
Fair enough.
The 40X shit that I watched Frozen Empire in.
Oh
my God, dude. Oh my God. Seriously. I don't know how this has made it past how many years it's been playing or whatever. I think I got into this theater totally on accident, but I can totally not recommend that. Anyway, on to our big recommend, which is Warrior, and it's Jeremy's. So take us away, Jeremy.
I'm fine. It's just that you're so big.
It's so huge.
It's a good rule, but this is bigger than rules.
It's bigger on the inside.
Is it? I noticed.
Warrior opens with Nick Nolte's Paddy Conlon as he's leaving an AA meeting and listening to Moby Dick while he drives home. This man loves Moby Dick, and more power to him. We then see, as he arrives home, that Tom Hardy's character, Tommy, is waiting for him at his home, and it's clear immediately that they haven't seen each other in a long, long time. Things are super awkward, and Tommy isn't shy about ribbing his father for his past wrongs. When Paddy says, "No more women for me," Tommy says, "Yeah, it must be hard finding a woman that can take a punch nowadays." They go inside, and Tommy just keeps ribbing his father for all of his past wrongs. And what I appreciate about the movie is that it lets the characters focus on their trauma without necessarily giving us a list rundown of all the wrongs that Paddy did as a bad alcoholic abusive father. I think it's enough to know that he was a bad alcoholic abusive father. And Tommy just goes at him. Paddy tells him he did hire a private investigator, and he did learn that Tommy and his mother had gone to the Pacific Northwest, and that Tommy's mother had died, and Tommy had joined the Marines, and that's, he claims, all he knows. Tommy does everything he can to inflict emotional pain, describing in detail how his mother died, waiting for Jesus to save her. He insults his father and then falls asleep drunk in his chair. We then meet Brendan, which is Tommy's brother, played by Joel Edgerton, and his wife, Tess, that's Jennifer Morrison, who I think is one of the unsung heroes in this cast. And they're having a backyard birthday party for their daughter. And then Tess goes off to work in a short skirt, and he doesn't like it. And then she makes a reference to his tendency to get into scuffles. It's alluded to that he's a bouncer. So Tommy goes to a boxing gym and joins, and then we see Brendan in school teaching a science lesson. Brendan is a physics teacher. At the gym, Tommy volunteers to spar with a really great fighter, Mad Dog, and then Tommy kicks his ass, and it's awesome. It's a bit of foreshadowing, but it lays the groundwork that Tommy is a badass. It also lays the groundwork that he doesn't care about accolades or praise or anything. The sparring match is filmed and eventually goes viral. Around that same time, Brendan is learning that he's upside down on his mortgage, largely because of past medical bills due to his daughter's heart. And I think a little bit of liberty is taken here in how much pressure they put on him and how the bank is calculating his interest owed. But it's beside the point, because plenty of people are upside down on their mortgages in real life, behind on their payments. Everybody can relate to this situation. So Brendan is kind of desperate for money, and he goes to a local parking lot near a strip club MMA match, as you do, The movie suggests these things are everywhere, and maybe they are. Maybe after Fight Club, this became a thing. I don't know, but I'm willing to believe that this is a thing. And he lies to his wife about where he's going. He wins the fight fairly easily, wins some money. But when he gets home, his wife sees his black eye and his injuries, and they have an argument that I get the feeling they've had a dozen times before, in that she doesn't want to raise their daughters having to answer questions about where their father is, why he's in the hospital. It's mentioned that he has been in the hospital before because of his enjoyment of fighting. We cut back to Tommy, and he goes and meets with his father to ask him to help train for this big MMA tournament called, I wrote it down somewhere, the Sparta. He makes it clear, we're not reconciling here. This is not a father-son thing. You're a good trainer. I don't want to hear anything come out of your mouth other than training-related shit. Which Patty will break that rule on the very first morning, but that's beside the point. He's adamant that this doesn't mean anything, but I kind of appreciate that Patty stands his ground here and says, you wouldn't be here if you didn't need me, so don't be threatening to walk away every 5 minutes. And he demands Tommy hand over his pills that he heard shaking when he walked in the door. Tommy hands over 2 bottles of pills, tries to keep a third for himself, but Patty's not having it.
Nick Nolte needs to talk to Clint Eastwood and Trouble with the Curve on this, man. Their ears are amazing.
Yeah, seriously. It could be that he's just being playful with his language and he happens to already know somehow that Tommy had 3. I don't know. Anyway, I also should have mentioned before by now that Patty is about 1,000 days sober. I just mentioned he was coming out of an AA meeting, but he has been sober for about 1,000 days, which I want to point out is not nothing. So by the time Brendan returns to class the next day, all the students already know about his fight in the strip club because one of them kids' older brothers was there at the titty bar. The principal also knows. This is Kevin Dunn, one of my favorite character actors, and this is a really great fun role. And the superintendent is coming by. He hasn't been in the building since 9/11. Brendan is suspended without pay, which is the worst kind of suspended. Then we cut to a military base somewhere overseas. It's not really clear. Maybe it says on the screen and I missed it. But soldiers are watching a YouTube video. This is the viral video of Tommy beating the shit out of Mad Dog in the gym. And there's a soldier in that room that recognizes Tommy and runs and pulls a videotape out and confirms that, yes, this guy is Tommy. And we'll get back to this in a little bit. Brendan, pretty desperate at this point, not making any money from his teaching job, has decided he's just going to do these strip club parking lot fights in several different cities and make $300 or $400 each fight. And that's how they're going to try and keep their house. So he goes to see Frank Grillo, who's great in this movie. He's an old friend and he's a trainer. Frank Grillo is training a fighter for this Sparta event. The Sparta event is a brand new event where they're going to have 16 fighters in a round robin style, Grand Prix style tournament and come out with one winner at the end. And Marco Santos is the name of the boxer that Frank is training for that event. But he agrees to allow Brendan to train by sparring with this guy. And so that's the arrangement they set up. Then when Brendan gets home, Patty, his father, is waiting for him. And Brendan is the opposite of happy to see him. And they have an argument. Brendan reminds Patty that he can't see his grandchildren because of that shit you pulled. But we aren't explicitly told what that shit was that Patty pulled because it doesn't matter. Patty is the kind of character who probably did dozens of things that could qualify as that shit you pulled. After learning that he's gotten into the Sparta, Tommy calls his former soldier's wife, inquiring about her kids. It's implied that he's made promises after his fellow soldier died that he would take care of them. And then we get one of my favorite things in movies, a training montage that comes along with the Sports Center style montage that hypes up the Sparta event and this Russian fighter named Koba, who is basically the T-1000. And I think it's interesting here. There's a lot of things about these two characters that are polar opposites. Tommy and Brendan. I mean, Tommy, I wrote, trains like Bruce Wayne from the Snyderverse, while Brendan trains like a normal person who's training. Like Tommy is like flipping over tractor tires and doing all this Rocky shit. Then we see Brendan even defeats Marco Santos in a spar. Again, Santos is the main guy at this gym that's going to the Sparta event. So Brendan must be pretty good because Frank is even impressed. He's like, no, he did not tap you. That's the best of the best. Santos injures himself while running and training. This is maybe why you shouldn't run up and down rocky mountains when you're training for an event and just use a treadmill. But hey, and then Brendan manages to convince Frank to put him in the spot for the Sparta event. That's maybe the least believable thing in the whole movie for me.
It is.
And I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
And the movie basically says, we're desperate. They didn't have any options. This guy has MMA experience.
Well, the thing for me, I'm sorry to interject at this point while you're talking through the plot of the movie, but the fact that a $5 million prize can only attract 16 fighters and there's no waiting list after that, other than somebody who like asks his trainer really nice. It's kind of insane.
It's very much Creed 3, right? I mean, Creed 3 is even worse that Jonathan Majors gets that shot or whatever, but it's the same idea. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a lot of questions about this tournament, but we'll save those for later. All right. Back at the hotel, the first day of the event, Brendan and Tommy see each other across the lobby, but they don't speak. Tommy goes out of his way to not have any warmth in his face for Brendan at all. Later that evening, the news breaks that Tommy had been a war hero, and the soldier who recognized him was among several soldiers that were about to drown until Tommy arrived and ripped the door off of a tank to let them out, and then disappeared and didn't take any credit. Tommy is embarrassed at the footage when he sees it on the news and leaves to go for a walk, even though Patty seems proud of him. Brendan then calls, and it's implied that Patty tells him Tommy's gone out for a walk. And then Brendan and Tommy meet on the beach. And the first time I watched this movie, I thought they were in Las Vegas, and I was very confused about the beach. But they are in Atlantic City, which makes a lot more sense for there to be a beach. I love this scene. There's so much unspoken, despite all the things that they say. But essentially, Tommy is mad that Brendan didn't leave with him and their mother, and that he stayed behind with this evil dad because he was in love with a girl. In Tommy's view, Brendan chose Patty, the dad, over Tommy. Brendan is equally mad at Tommy that he never called to tell him his mother was dying or had died. And in here, he says, what do you want me to do? I was 16 years old. And I'm going to come back to that later, but I think it's really important that they were teenagers the last time they saw each other. There's all this hurt and pain and anger, but we know as human beings that we don't always remember everything exactly as it went. So anyway, I'm fascinated by what this movie has to say about trauma and how people deal with it. A group of students comes to the principal and asks if they can watch the Sparta event in the auditorium. I think it's pretty hilarious that they thought there was a chance he was going to say yes. He says, I wrote it down, it's one of my favorite quotes. He says, you want to use the school auditorium to watch the suspended teacher engage in the behavior that got him suspended? Tommy is the first one to fight, and he's up against Barbosa, who is an MMA champion and not an evil pirate. Patty tries to rub the shoulders of Tommy before he goes into the fight, and Tommy snaps, get your hands off me. Tommy one punches this guy in about 15 seconds and leaves the cage, and it's fucking awesome. Brendan is up next, and Patty hangs in the wings and tries to say encouraging things, but it's not something that Brendan really acknowledges other than a look. Back at home, Tess is folding laundry and waiting for a text about the fight. She's not watching the fight. She's just living in her anxiety and waiting for a text. We also see that the principal, God bless him, is watching anxiously at home on his television. Brendan's fight is a lot longer than Tommy's, but Brendan is able to subdue Midnight Lee in the second round after being nearly choked out in the first round. Kevin Dunn's reaction to the victory slays me. He goes running into the kitchen telling his wife, he tapped him out. He did it. He did it. He did it. He did it. And it just feels so very genuine. Then we jump to Brendan's second fight, and it's in round 3. We don't get to see the first 2 rounds, and the announcers seemingly are surprised that Brendan is not already dead. He is getting crushed. Unfortunately, Tess, his wife, picked this fight to watch on television, and it's clearly a brutal beatdown until Brendan again gets a submission hold on his opponent near the end. On the way out, Patty tries to encourage Brendan, but Brendan stops and yells at his father, "I'm doing this." He doesn't want to give his father any credit. Tommy's second fight is nearly twice as long as his first, as he pummels a guy and the ref stops the fight seconds into the first round. I think it's fascinating to watch them both be driven by different motivations. Brendan absolutely needs the money. He's here for desperation. Tommy just needs an outlet for his demons. He doesn't care about the money. He doesn't care about the title. He doesn't care about the praise. He just needs to beat some ass in a legal way. At a casino later.
I'm sorry, and I guess there's a promise to the buddy's wife.
Yes.
Yes. Although I don't know if we're like, oh, if he doesn't win this fight, she's screwed. I don't think we get that sort of,
No, we get the sense that she could use a little help, but she's not at the end of the rope right now. And again, Tommy doesn't want the money for himself. He's not like, he's not here. No, he's not here for the same reasons all the other 15 fighters are here. At a casino later, playing some kind of slot machine or something, Tommy confesses to his father that the drowning soldiers he saved, he only did so in the process of deserting his own unit. And he simply couldn't let fellow humans drown. He then turns it back on his father when Patty tries to show him compassion and says, "The only thing I have in common with Brendan Conlon is that we both have no use for you." And he again states, "I liked you better when you were drunk." This has an immediate impact as we see Tommy the next morning discovering Patty absolutely wasted, listening to Moby Dick on headphones and screaming for them to turn the ship. This is just a fascinating moment for me because Tommy basically sits his father down and cradles him in his arms and rubs his head while his father cries himself to sleep. And I think smarter people than me could maybe better break this down, but I think it's very interesting that Tommy is able to have compassion for drunk Patty and has nothing but disdain for sober Patty. He's mad at sober Patty for not having ever been there when he was a kid. Drunk Patty is too pathetic for him to be mad at. And I think there's even a little bit of love in the act that he does here. Tommy's next fight is against the very guy he destroyed in the viral video months earlier, Mad Dog. I think it's Mad Dog Grimes. Yeah, it is. Tommy just clotheslines him and punches the fuck out of his face until the ref stops the fight. Also of note, the announcer says Mad Dog Grimes has been poleaxed. And I think we all should add poleaxed into our vocabulary. I looked it up, and the definition of poleaxe means to kill or hit or knock down as if with a poleaxe. And I just thought that was a beautiful word that needs to be in more conversations on the regular. The school kids and the teachers and even the principal all end up at a local drive-in to watch the next Brendan fight on the big screen. And Tess actually travels to the fight herself and somehow gets a second row seat. Honestly, I have as many questions about the ticketing process for this event as I do the event itself. Somehow, fucking 200 Marines bought out a whole section on StubHub to come watch Tommy fight. That doesn't make any sense at all. Anyway, Brendan has drawn Koba, who is basically the T-1000, and he is not an angry ape bent on an uprising. Koba beats the ever-loving shit out of Brendan all first round as Tess immediately regrets her decision to attend in person. Second round, more of the same. Brendan is shellacked and thrown to the mat over and over, taking repeated punches to the head. Frank gives Brendan a great pep talk that essentially boils down to him saying, "Stop being a bitch and win this fight." But what he actually says is, you don't knock him out, you don't win. You don't win, you don't have a home. And it is the perfect thing that Brendan needs to hear in this moment. Brendan Rocky Balboas himself through the third round, getting his ass beat again, and then has another miracle I'm going to break your arm hold, which is the official name for it. Koba breaks free, but then Brendan gets him in I'm going to break your knee hold. And Koba taps out. And if nothing else, this movie serves as a good advertisement for why I have never been in a fight. Before the two brothers can square off, news breaks of Tommy's true identity, the fact that they're brothers, and the fact that he had deserted his unit. We do learn, however, when his former army buddy's wife is interviewed on the news, that man had died in friendly fire, and the rest of Tommy's unit had died from friendly fire. And that is why Tommy deserted his unit. And I'm not sure the movie needs to couch it like that. I think the movie is saying plenty about how we're all gray. We all have good and bad parts to us. But it kind of exonerates his desertion when you find out the reason, and that's okay. Then finally, we have the emotional fight between the two brothers. Tommy, as usual, attacks furiously, punching and chasing Brendan around the octagon. Tommy slams Brendan on the mat repeatedly and punches his head. The round ends, and Tommy punches one last time like a dickhead. This is kind of a thing that boxing movies do, and maybe this is a thing that happens in boxing. I don't know, but this reminded me very much of Rocky movies when punches were landed after the horn. Frank says to Brendan between rounds, he's not your brother, okay? He's in the way. And I think this is the moment that Brendan starts to crack in terms of his resolve. Tommy again dominates round 2, and Brendan looks absolutely finished as the horn sounds. Round 3 sees Brendan reverse the momentum and pin his brother in an "I'll break your arm if you don't surrender" hold. But Tommy will not surrender. And Tommy eventually allows his arm shoulder to be broken rather than tap out. This is the stubbornest man I've ever seen in my life. He then, at the end of the round, chokes Brendan and throws him into the corner. And then Frank implores Brendan, take him down and finish him. And Brendan kind of gives a look here. Why I interpret the look is, I don't necessarily share your cold-bloodedness right now. Tommy, broken arm and all, refuses to quit. Brendan doesn't want to fight anymore. He's begging Tommy to throw in the towel, but Tommy forces Brendan to fight him and hit him. He's easily beating Tommy as the round ends. He returns Tommy's favor after the horn and lands several punches. Then he spots his dad in the audience, and I think this is the full realization moment. And his father kind of nods at him. And in the final round, Tommy feigns a few punches, but will not quit, forces Brendan to kick him and subdue him. And then as he subdues him, Brendan says, I'm getting chills, "I'm sorry, Tommy. I'm sorry. Tap, Tommy. It's okay." And then finally he says, "I love you. I love you, Tommy." And Tommy taps, and I start crying. And I think this is why it's important that they were 16, and I'm guessing Tommy was between 12 and 14 when they parted, because they have probably never genuinely said, "I love you" to each other. If they ever said it, they were little kids that were being forced to say it by their grandma or something. This is the first genuine time maybe anyone has ever told Tommy, "I love you," other than his mother. And it's powerful. As they leave the ring arm in arm, we see Patty shed a tear in the stands, and I interpret this to be the tear of a man who finally realizes that love in his family didn't die with his abusiveness. And then the movie's over. I have several things I want to touch on notes-wise, but I'm going to let you guys go first to share your thoughts on Warrior.
So, yeah, it's funny. I watched this movie back in 2011. I loved it. Thought it was one of the best fight movies I had seen in a long time, and had not seen it again until 2 days ago. And so I was reminded of how good this movie was a couple of days ago. I kind of like the idea. I don't think it's the main one, and maybe I don't even know if this movie is purposely saying this, but I like the idea that all of these fighters in the tournament seem to be brute force guys. They go in and they want to punch the hell out of you and just knock you down, and that's the big thing with them. But Brendan doesn't do that. Brendan is not capable of it, first off, but then second off, he's always looking for that mistake that these fighters make, and he finds it. Which I know they kind of glossed over his previous UFC experience in this movie, where it was like he was okay, he didn't follow Frank Grillo's advice back then and whatever. But I don't know if Frank Grillo is like telling him, look out for these weak spots and then turn the tables on them when you're getting your ass kicked a lot. I don't know if that's happening a lot. He seems to be getting that a lot, but I do like that aspect of the movie, is that sort of the brains versus brawn type of thing going on in his fights compared to anybody else's. Everybody else is just a big hulking person wanting to end you, basically. And so I like that. It was an interesting thing too, watching the sort of the behind the scenes on this, because I've got the Blu-ray on this,
Oh,
and
neat.
they were talking about like how Frank Grillo is an actual like has actual UFC experience and all
Oh,
this other stuff, and I was like, yeah, perfect person to put in this movie. Why isn't he the brother and not Tom Hardy? If that's
oh.
the guy, and I love Tom Hardy. Don't get me wrong. I think he and Edgerton play brothers very well. But if you wanted to put Grillo in, to show his stuff, I think he would have been good at least as another fighter in the ring or something. But they did populate it with people who were actual like awesome UFC guys and everything, and all the other mixed martial arts out there. I don't want to just make it UFC, but I thought that was kind of funny. They're like, oh, Frank Grillo is an awesome fighter. Let's make him a coach. Um, you mentioned all the, I mean, Joel Edgerton's one of those guys who's just one of those. This whole thing's filled with underrated actors, right? Edgerton's one of them. Grillo's one of them. Jennifer Morrison is one of them. Although I will say, as much as I like Jennifer Morrison, they don't give her much to do. I love that she's cheering it. I love how she cheers it on at the end and everything, and she's whatever. But man, how many times does she go, I'll do anything other than you fighting? And then he's like, well, we'll lose the house. And she's like, I don't care. But then she just kind of relents. And she does this at least twice, if not three times in the movie, where she's like, I don't care. We can do something else with, I don't want you to get, I mean, in all honesty, she's 100% right, by the way.
Yeah.
Joel Edgerton should be like broken after his first fight. And there's a lot of glorification of being able to take punches in this, which I don't like that for his future, by the way, especially doing 2 fights in a day and then 4 fights in 2 days.
Yeah.
That's one of those things where we just like sort of glorify all that stuff. Anyway, that doesn't take away my enjoyment of the movie, although it's just something that I just kind of like sift away and just say, there's some things about this that I would change. We already talked about the tournament itself that I thought was laughable because of how he's able to get into a 16 fighter tournament that is worth $5 million, and there's nobody out there that can take his place. The other thing is the seeding on this stuff.
Yeah.
Joel Edgerton should be fighting Koba at the very beginning of this. That should be the seeding. But no, he gets to fight somebody else like middle of the pack. Still great, still probably should beat Joel Edgerton. But there should be some seeding here at least, where like Koba, the number 1 guy, fights Joel Edgerton, the scrub, and we get that out of the way. Anyway, they must have done it randomly. They must have picked it out of a hat. I don't know how they did it, whatever. But in the end, yeah, this movie is great. I think you brought up the question about Tom Hardy being able to go up to his dad and say and be comforting when he's drunk and when and not so much when he's sober. And I think it's because it's easy to get his message across when he's sober. Like, he's been waiting to say this forever. If he's a drunk, there's no point in saying all the things that he says. When he's and so when he's sober, this is finally his window into finally saying all the things he's wanted to say all his life. And then when he becomes drunk, it's like, okay, God damn it, Dad, I do feel sorry for you that you have this disease and you've succumbed to it tonight in just a horrible fashion. And he probably knows that he's responsible for that. After that casino thing, he knows that he's the one who drove him to do that, even though we're all responsible for our actions.
Yep.
He knows that he egged that on and everything. So I did find that to be fascinating as well, is that how Hardy's definitely got the most complex character of all this. He's a very hard-edged guy, and doesn't seem like he's letting anybody in. On the flip side, he's a war hero pulling doors off tanks, but he deserts the army, and then, or the Marines, and then he's like, he's a hard ass to his dad, but then when his dad falls off the wagon, or does it fall or go back on the wagon, I can't remember. He's sympathetic towards that, and of course, obviously, he wants to make things right with his buddy's wife, who that lost his life and everything. So he's got a lot of like different things going on with him that I really appreciated in this. But yes, I'm glad that you recommended this movie. This is something that I needed to see again after all these years.
Excellent. You also just reminded me of Seinfeld, when the drunk guy is heckling Seinfeld after he's gone drinking again. And Seinfeld wonders if it's on the wagon or off the wagon, and the guy goes, "What do you know about wagons?" And Jerry says, "Well, I know enough not to get on them." Aaron?
I echo the gratefulness that you have recommended this and seeing it again. I apologize. There will not be time for questions today. I have so much to say about this movie. This movie is so good. I have this at a 4.5 on Letterboxd. It's going to a 5. It is a 5 out of 5 for me. I think I will start by focusing on the thing that jumped out the most to me this time, which we've kind of danced around a little bit, but this is a metaphor movie in many ways. And the way these two brothers fight is a metaphor for how they handled what they dealt with growing up.
Yes.
Joel Edgerton stayed and survived and stuck it out and found a way and did the submission. And Tom Hardy just got out of there and punched. Like, him leaving the octagon that fast.
Yes.
Like, that is intentional. Like, he is a leaver. Like, he is I'm going to go punch life in the face and then go do the next thing. Gonna go in the army, punch life in the face, go do the next thing. And like, so there's this real metaphor that's going on with, these brothers and the way they fight, and how it's directly related to this man at the center of both of their lives. And so you're dealing with two brothers in this final match who are motivated by the same motivating factor to approach it in two different ways. And it's just this really, really interesting metaphor for everything they've been through, and really jumped out at me this time as like how much of what they're doing is a metaphor for how they've survived this man in their life. I also wanted to talk about, before I get to some of the smaller things, I wanted to talk about Gavin O'Connor, who we haven't mentioned yet, directing this. He understands what makes sports movies enjoyable, maybe more than any other director that I've seen do stuff. Like, he gets how to, because let me just say this, I do not like pugilistic sports. Like, I'm not into boxing. I'm not into MMA. It's one of those things I hope falls by the wayside eventually as, a profession, just because it's so terrible and traumatic to the body. But he totally understands the idea of what it means to watch a sporting event. And I think one of his key weapons in his arsenal is the reaction shot. He wields celebrations and reactions like swords. Like, he absolutely understands like exactly where we need to cut to feel the emotion of what's going on. It was the same in Miracle. He, like, the celebration stuff in Miracle is that way. And I would just slide it in right here. The Way Back is much better than people think. It deals with many of the same humanity that his other movies have dealt with.
Is that the one with Ben Affleck?
Yeah, it's the Ben Affleck basketball. I always
get the
one.
Way Back and the Way Back confused.
Oh, maybe it is the Way Back. No, I think you're right. I think it is the Way Back, and the Way Back is the pool.
I like the
movie.
Affleck.
I think you're right.
Movie.
Yeah.
I like both of them.
So yeah, I did want to give a shout out to Gavin O'Connor. It's interesting when he's not directing sports. I don't like his movies as much, but the ones he does about sports, I always end up enjoying quite a bit. But I think this is saying something, because I love Miracle. I think this is his best. I think this is a phenomenal film. I love the use of Ode to Joy in this. Beethoven's Ode to Joy, I think, is really interestingly used. I love that song. and what it represents. Brian Callen is such a good Joe Rogan in this movie that when Joe Rogan watches this movie, he thinks he must have been in it. Like he is that good at doing the Joe Rogan thing. It's insane.
Apparently, they're really good friends in real life.
Interesting.
So I imagine they had some fun conversations about this when he was doing it. But yeah, he's very, very, very Joe Rogan.
I just wanted to point out a couple moments that really moved me. You mentioned the scene on the beach. There's this moment where he says, oh, were you in the Corps? Oh, then you're no brother to me. And it just hit me on this level of like, he's so trapped in this idea of him not being present in his life, of that separation, that, you know, there's just this complete disconnect that he is unwilling to.
It's also interesting because I don't know that he genuinely feels like all Marines are his brothers. Maybe he does, but I feel like in that instance, that's a weapon he's using to hurt Brendan.
Yeah. And then let's see, the walk-off knockout. You mentioned that first one is shot so well. That was really cool. The public reveal of the brother connection I thought was handled really interestingly, where it's like we've known the entire time, so it's not anything to us. And then the movie finds a really nice subtle way to remind us that nobody else knew this.
Yeah.
And then like the reactions of everybody, like, oh my goodness, like. And it's introduced by the Rogan type character just being like, I don't even know how to tell you this.
Yeah.
This seems yeah. It's so cool. This is right before both of these guys kind of broke, right? Like Hardy and Edgerton, they're right on the cusp here of kind of breaking. This is right before The Dark Knight, I think, for Hardy.
Dark Knight,
yeah, although Hardy was an Inception before this, but
yes, that was the one. Yeah,
I don't know if necessarily Hardy was like a household name after Inception, but yeah, Dark Knight Rises certainly put him there.
They're just such great choices. We were slacking about our reviews of this when it originally came out, and Chris read your review of this, and then I watched my old review of this, and in my review I said something about the guys they got for these MMA guys are so good or whatever, like didn't even know who they were,
That's awesome.
or whatever, and it's just interesting to kind of go back in time and think, oh yeah, I didn't know who Joel Edgerton was at that point. Was probably not until The Gift. Do you remember The Gift? That came out a couple years later.
He directed that too.
Yeah, that was when I really first started paying attention, I think, after Warrior.
IMDb says that Tom Hardy flew in from England for his audition, and instead of going to the hotel, he went to Gavin O'Connor's house at midnight and ended up staying there for 5 days.
Yeah, this whole movie is filled with stories like that. Like I think Edgerton lived with Frank Grillo.
Yep.
And they took months to actually do the things that they do in the movie to learn all these different moves. It's not all. I'm sure there are stunt doubles especially when they're getting thrown around and shit like that. They've got stunt doubles, but to do the moves that they're doing and everything, they actually had to learn all that. So.
Yep.
Jeremy, you mentioned the exact same experience I had with Tap Tommy. It's okay. I love you, Tommy. I love you. Just a mess. Just weeping after that moment. There's something really, really interesting and beautiful about it. And I think it's this, for me, I think it has to do with the movie turning on its head this idea of heroes and villains in sports movies. So you will usually, like, you look at Rocky IV, just like as an easy example. You've got, Drago, the big villain, and Rocky is the hero, and we know what we're rooting for. And this movie dares to say that it's not about heroes and villains in this final match. It's about brothers, and it's about, the difference in how you handle conflict and how you handle trauma in those kind of things. And so what it allows for us to do is subtly actually have a rooting interest. I think our rooting interest, according to the movie, is in the Joel Edgerton character to win this tournament, but to also understand how deeply the quote-unquote villain in this role, Tommy, is as a human being, and what he has gone through and dealt with is a real interesting magic trick that this movie does. And it gives that final match a different texture than most sports movies have. And so when you have that final moment, there's a real catharsis of like understanding this is the way it had to be, but you're feeling those things for both of these guys, and then I really think it's interesting in the final match how Tommy learns to survive, and how Joel Edgerton's character learns to attack. Like he breaks the arm, he does the thing, and so there's a little bit of them doing what the other person has done in their life to kind of finish off this match. And there's a walk-off. It's a totally different kind of walk-off, but just like with all of other Tommy's matches, there's a walk-off, before it's done, with the rigmarole. So yeah, I found all that stuff really, really intentional and moving and smart. And man, this movie's good. This movie's so good.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. That's
I
fine.
was just going to say, if you have siblings, if you have a father, you can probably connect to this movie. Like,
yeah,
I like to think that most men have some measure of dad issues. When there are legions of books written about this, I have nothing close to what these two guys had in terms of the bad dad. My dad was a great man, who I just don't agree with on everything. But it still hits me. It still hits me to know that, I mean, my brother and I didn't get close until probably 5-10 years ago. It's weird. It's hard to be siblings. It's hard to say I love you. This movie is just really, really good. Go ahead.
One final note is that Nick Nolte was nominated for an Oscar.
Yeah.
On this. And it was his first since Affliction, which I think also dealt with alcoholism. Is another great movie,
wow.
by the way.
Is that his white whale in this? Is that the Moby Dick metaphor? Is alcoholism his, like, conquering that his white whale? Is that why when he falls off the wagon, he's talking about you're a bad captain or what? Like, I was trying to put that together and it never landed for me.
That's pretty good. I thought it was being a good father was his white whale.
It's possible as well.
And he could never catch that. That's interesting.
Yeah, it could be very well. All right, on to our super secret double feature.
Be very, very quiet. Secret? What secret?
Our dirty little secret.
I tell you something I've never told anyone.
Aaron, what do you think?
He's going to say Miracle.
Miracle would be fun. No, I landed on 2 non-sports movies for my super secret double feature, and I could not. This is the hardest I've wrestled with picking between 2 choices because one of them is more about brothers, and one of them is more about a father of sons, and so I kind of had to ask myself which way I wanted to go. And I went with Father of Sons. I will say the other one was, well, actually, I won't say it just in case it is Chris's. And then, Chris, if you don't mention it, I'll mention it. But I ended up going with what may seem like a very strange choice, but it really works for me. I went with Fences. This is kind of, Warrior in many ways is the redemptive version of Fences. And so much of Warrior is about the Nick Nolte character. We start on him. He's the very first person we see in the movie. And I have an inkling he was supposed to be that look he had was supposed to be the last thing we see in the movie, but it just didn't quite work. And so they end on the brothers walking out. But very close to the end, we see that this has been a journey for him that he is now smiling about. Fences doesn't have that redemptive ending for the bad father, but it allows us all these same levels of how you deal with trauma. There are 2 sons involved and how they've dealt with the trauma of this father. Football is a very big part of one of their lives. And yeah, this is a fabulous movie with some fabulous performances. It feels like watching a play in many ways. I don't know that it becoming a movie really expanded it beyond what was already a great stage play. But the performances make it well worth a watch. So.
Makes me anxious. He's so good at playing this character that I really don't want to be around in this movie.
Yeah.
It makes me anxious. I don't know why. There's probably something deep seated in my brain that I've forgotten about that he reminds me of. He's great in this movie. I like this call. Very good.
And go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say it also takes place in Pittsburgh. They're both Pittsburgh movies, so yeah.
Well, there you go. Well, then Source Code is a great double feature.
Yes, there you go.
I think source code was Pittsburgh, but I don't remember.
Source code is Chicago.
Oh, Chicago. Fuck. Oh, it's Jack Reacher that's Pittsburgh.
There you go.
Two movies that are exactly the same. Of all the Viola Davis performances in her long catalog, the Fences one might be the best one.
It's so good.
I went through two choices as well, and one of them was only sort of tangentially related to it, and I will go ahead and say that it's not going to be the double feature, but Courage Under Fire came to my mind watching this, mainly because of the friendly fire stuff and Denzel Washington having the alcoholism and having to deal with like the trauma of what he thinks he's done, and what he feels like is his redemptive arc all the way through it, and is to find out the truth about the Meg Ryan character and the whole thing. And as I said the name of this movie, and you guys reacted to it, I should have just gone with Courage Under Fire. But I went with a movie that is far less in quality, actually, as a double feature. But I think it's better than we give it credit for. There was a movie back in 2007 that got crushed by Spider-Man 3 on opening weekend. It's called Lucky You. Which also deals with a lot of this, where Eric Bana and Robert Duvall are both poker players. They have a strained relationship, and it's the whole movie is building towards Bana and Robert Duvall playing in the World Series of Poker. Of course, they get to the final table together and everything, because that's how poker works. And so that's the one that I came up with, because I think it had more similarities family wise and things like, and then it also had a competition. Obviously this is a movie where you think of like 500 boxing movies, and I immediately had to like cast them all aside because that's just too easy on this case. So I had to come up with something that was like, so either or. Maybe Courage Under Fire is the better one, but I'm going to went with Lucky You on this one, and I think it's a lot better than we gave it credit for.
The brother's choice that I really wanted to go with was Hell or High Water. I think there's a lot of similarities between the way the brothers interact in that and how it resolves, and that was another choice I really, really loved. But at the end, there just wasn't that father element of it, which I think is such a crucial part of it. Also had the bank foreclosing on a house thing. Like, they both were, were interesting choices to me.
I think they even allude in that movie to the father who is gone having been bad, like a bad person.
It's there, but it's very, in the background. It's more about
all these are good. All right, we are over time. Chris, what is our homework for next week?
All right, continuing the comedies of the decade, and once again had to sift through a whole bunch of them. I had a couple of movies in mind for a really long time for this decade, but I have settled on Hot Rod in 2007 for this. The Andy Samberg movie. It's Akiva Schaffer of Lonely Island, and of course Jorma Taccone is in this movie as well. But you also have Isla Fisher, Danny McBride, Bill Hader, Will Arnett is in this. This movie, I feel like, has never gotten the credit it deserves. It's silly as all fuck, but man, it's so good, so fun. Have you guys seen this?
Oh yes.
I saw it once.
You didn't like it?
I don't think I liked it, but it's been so long, man. My tastes have changed. I mean, it's been almost 20 years. And all those people you just rattled off, I didn't remember any of those people were in this movie. So I'm excited to give it another shot.
Okay, well, I risk every time worrying if this was like too silly for Jeremy or if it's whatever, and I'm like, man, this is one. I thought of some others; they were probably sillier than this, but go ahead.
It's so early in the Samberg thing, right? Like it was kind of like his first real, big. I mean, Lonely Island was doing stuff, but I remember really liking it, and then after Pop Star, I remember going back and watching it again in loving it. So like it got better even the second time I watched it. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. This is not available, I don't think, on most free streaming services or for free on streaming services. I saw a couple, like Hoopla, I believe, was on there, and there was like some other one that I don't have. Um, so I'm sorry for that. There's not anything where you can find it for free. I mean, maybe there's a way to find free movies. I don't know. That I'm not going to mention. But
I'll just say Hoopla is free because it's connected to your local library. So if you have if you have a library card, you just put your library card into Hoopla, and you can watch any of the movies that are on Hoopla. So
well, there you go. I had no idea about that. So there you go. If you have a library card, watch Hot Rod. Okay, that's going to do it for this week. Once again, thanks a lot, chat, for coming out and watching us today. We appreciate you very much, and we will see you next time. See ya.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Be a part of the live show by being a member of the Sin Club at Patreon at patreon.com/cinemasins. Chat with us on the Cinemasins Discord at discord.gg/cinemasins or Cinemasins Twitter at Cinemasins, and email any comments or questions to Recotopia at cinemasins.com. That's RECOTOPIA at cinemasins.com.
Just arguing with Jonathan about Justin Lin.
Also known as a Tuesday. I'll tell you what's up. I watched a movie.
Oh, no.
No, you didn't.
Based on a recommendation of a friend who said, this is one of the most Dicer movies I've ever seen. In fact, he said it here a week ago about Les Samurai. So I watched Les Samurai, Chris. And before I tell you how I feel about this movie,
okay,
what made you think me when you watched this movie? I'm really curious. What made you think, oh, I know Aaron's gonna love this movie?
I don't know.
That is a fair answer. That is a completely fair answer.
It just felt like a movie that you would really like, so that's all I can say about it.
So it was instinct.
It wasn't like, oh, this has all the elements of a Dicer movie.
Got it.
Starting with, and I have this chart that I go down,
That's what I assumed. I assumed you kept a diary of some sort, and then we're doing comparisons.
I do not. Not yet. Not until tomorrow.
I loved it. I thought it was great. It's a really interesting character study of a character that is so under the surface that there's a lot going on with motivations and what he's doing, but he's very staid in all of his expressions and everything, that by the time you get to the end you can feel what he's feeling with just the slightest bit of emoting that he's doing. I really liked it. I thought it was really good. Thank you for the recommendation.
Right. It's the same thing that goes with Jeremy. When I say this is a Jeremy movie, I'm not like, here's 5 reasons. Here's 5 aspects of a Jeremy movie. Like we're on Watch Mojo or something like that. And I just go, number 1, Catlin Deaver.
What's funny is you do just kind of get a feeling. When I was watching that Runaway Train movie that I recommended last week, I was thinking, I bet you Jonathan has not only seen this, but loves it. And then when he was doing the edit, he messaged me, Runaway Train, I love this movie. And I was like, why am I not surprised? There wasn't anything about it. I guess maybe 70s in general. I feel like Jonathan has a really strong grasp of 70s cinema, at least stronger than me. But
he does, although that was 1985.
Oh man, we just did the King Kong 76, and as I was typing that into the Watchabox, I was like, it came out when I was 1 year old.
Yeah, man.
I'm older than that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying to do okay with that.
Yeah, I remember watching that movie at my grandparents' house, which was a trailer. And my grandpa, my mom's dad, worked for RCA. So they lived in a trailer, typical backwoods Indiana kind of family upbringing. but they always had the newest technology because he worked for RCA. So like we would go, stay in this, trailer down by the creek bank, no kidding, and have like the newest VCR or whatever was coming out at that point. And I remember them taping they taped everything off of television. And one of the things they had taped was the television special of King Kong 1976. And so, yeah, I remember watching that there.
There's a whole generation. I mean, that really is kind of specific to our generation, right? That whole taping off TV.
Yeah, that's how I saw
Fast
Star
forwarding
Wars. Are you
through-
kidding me? That's how I saw Star Wars the first 20 times I saw it.
Either fast forwarding through commercials or like pausing the recording so you don't record the commercials. I mean, that's how I saw almost everything I saw until I was 15 or 16, I think. I mean, we didn't have cable. We had, an antenna. We got a couple of networks and we taped, the big stuff. They always ran Wizard of Oz every year. They always ran Miracle on 34th Street. So we taped all that.
Yeah.
This is why I've seen Candleshoe and Muppets Take Manhattan 150 times each, because I had them on VHS.
It could be argued that VHS invented fandom in some ways because it allowed an entire generation to imbibe their favorite stuff over and over and over again.
Right.
So,
I mean, prior to that, you could do that with music, but you couldn't do it with television or movies. You couldn't even buy VHS. Like, there was that era where like VHS tapes cost Blockbuster $99 a piece, and they had to rent them out a bunch in order to make their money back.
Yep.
Did they have to spend that much? I think people had to spend that much. I'm not sure they did. Like Blockbuster, I think got their movies probably at a bulk rate or whatever, but then it was priced for rental so that people couldn't just buy the movie and not rent it from Blockbuster or whatever. Because I remember those days. You'd go into Suncoast and Suncoast Motion Picture Company, and you'd go in and try to buy something, that brand new that came out on VHS, and it was $99 or whatever.
I remember that. But
But
there was
I don't know if
time-
Blockbuster had to pay that.
There was a time before consumers could buy them. And again, you're probably right in that Blockbuster didn't pay the full amount, but I worked at Blockbuster for a little bit. Then the invoice showed $99, but the invoices for the Coke bibs we got at Regal showed their prices, but we never paid those prices. In actuality, I think Regal was paying for Coke, and then Coke just paid them back. I think there was an actual back and forth transaction. That may be what happened. Anyway, we're dating ourselves really hard with the outtake pre-show today.
I'd love to date myself.
That'd be a great date.
What else can we talk about from the early 80s that will make us sound silly?
Well, I can sound old. You want me to sound old?
I would prefer it.
I had to get a new contact prescription, and because my eyes are dying, because I'm ancient now, like they had to do the thing where, okay, are you ready for bifocals? Like, so you see things close up and things far away. And I was like, that's fine. Are there any like contact bifocals? So it turns out we had this entire conversation about how contact bifocals work. You're going to love this. They're not bifocals, they're multifocals. And they are concentric circles alternating for your distance prescription and your close-up prescription from the pupil outwards. And your brain learns which circles to look through based on if you're looking in the distance or looking up close. That's how cool your brain's connections to your eyeballs are. It can learn which tiny circles to look through based on what you're looking at. So yeah,
I know my brother has glasses that has like a sliding prescription. Like he's got three different levels of amplification in one lens, depending on where he's looking. And I don't know if it's that kind of trick, but yeah, the human brain is fucking scary with the kind of stuff that I keep coming back to. If you can give people a placebo and tell them they're being given a placebo, and many of them still improve, that says a lot about the power of our brains, the power of suggestion.
It is wild.
I was telling my wife the other day in college, whenever somebody would be about to sneeze, Josh used to go, "But you can't and more than 50% of the time, the sneeze would not materialize, just because it's this trick that he did where you'd be like, "What? I'm not gonna," and it just like cuts the wire in your brain for a second, and the sneeze goes away.
Well, the day I learned that I can get rid of the hiccups just by going, "You don't have the hiccups," was the best day of my life. I'll hiccup once, and I'll be like, "You don't have the hiccups," and I'm done hiccuping.
I just do the swallow water upside down trick.
Well, that's the thing. We teach ourselves all these tricks, and I think the tricks are just to trick our brain. I think they're placebos.
Yes,
half
they're
the
probably
time.
all placebos.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's wild. I feel like I could probably levitate things with my mind.